Hi, everybody. My name is Marvell Adams Jr. I serve as CEO of Caregiver Action Network. Let's see, I think this week is my 2-week anniversary, actually. So thanks for coming to the party. Appreciate it. But thanks, everybody, for being here. This is our NPS Neuropsychiatric Symptoms, or otherwise known as Alzheimer's and Dementia Symptoms Summit. Really, really glad for everyone to be with us. Looks like we have 117 folks on and counting. So as folks come in, we'll welcome them. The way today's panel is set up is that we have some caregivers that are going to be joining us on screen in just a moment. But we're going to also talk a little bit about neuropsychiatric symptoms, as well as really want to hear from you as well. And so throughout our conversation, we actually will be putting up about 3 or 4 poll questions. And those will come up on screen. You actually be able to click with them live during the session. So this is the first one, just to get the ice broken here. So which caregiver community do you identify with? This helps us really getting a sense of who we're reaching, the types of caregivers we're reaching, and particularly as we work to reach caregivers that are maybe falling through the gaps and aren't being reached with our information and outreach and support. So if you could take a moment to respond to that poll question, and there'll be 2 or 3 more of those as we go along. So it's appreciated. Thanks, everybody, for putting information in the chat as well. So let's see if we could go to the next slide. So just as a reminder, BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. So a person of color is what BIPOC stands for. Sorry for the acronym. If you could, as everybody's doing, if you could put your name, first name will do, or if you want to put first and last name, that is fine as well. Who you are caring for, meaning their relationship to you, or who you cared for previously, if that is the circumstance, and then where you are joining from. As I said, my name is Marvell, and I serve as CEO of Caregiver Action Network. I have not had someone in my immediate family that I've cared for with Alzheimer's or dementia or neuropsychiatric symptoms. I had an aunt that had and passed away from Alzheimer's, but I do spent 20 years of my career working in long-term care. So retirement communities, nursing home, and assisted living, and actually became certified as a dementia skills, communication skills coach. So I've spent a lot of my time, half my career, or half my life actually, when I think about it, working on helping individuals not only communicate better with their loved ones and friends that are experiencing symptoms of Alzheimer's or dementia, but also helping us understand what they may be trying to share with us. And so we'll get in a little bit of that later on in our program. But thanks so much for putting information in the chat there. This is awesome. Thank you so much. You guys are coming from all over. This is great.
Yes, absolutely. So it seems like we're at around coming in with everyone coming in with the polls and everything. Seeing some really interesting results coming in so far. I'm actually going, seems like we're hitting a bit of critical mass here with the poll. So I am going to be ending it. With the results coming in at 28% of y'all are saying you're rural, 10% saying BIPOC, 13% veteran, 4% LGBTQ+, 7% long distance, and over almost 50% other.
Great. And everyone, so in case you're curious, the person behind the curtain is not Oz, but instead our Dakota Heath. Dakota is a staff member at Caregiver Action Network, and along with our entire team of Caregiver Action is behind the scenes helping us out. And Dakota is going to be helping us drive the PowerPoint as well as, or the slide deck, as well as the polling questions. And so thanks so much, Dakota. And I'll also introduce Paola Zambrana. Paula is the master or mistress of all ceremonies when it comes to organizing behind the scenes. And so she's the voice you'll hear when I maybe get off script a little bit and need to be coached back into doing what's necessary. But thanks for being here, Paula. All righty. So just want to give a really great and heartfelt thanks to our supporters today, Lundbeck and Otsuka. We have really, over the last 2 years, grown a spectacular relationship with these two organizations, these two companies, who have made it really a part of their mission, a part of their goals to be able to support individuals with non-pharmacological education, like we'll see today, around neuropsychiatric symptoms, otherwise known as behaviors from Alzheimer's and dementia. So just a huge thanks to our friends at Lundbeck and Otsuka. All right. So we have accomplished number one, which is our welcome and introductions. And again, if you're joining us and haven't had a chance to do so, we welcome you to put your name, who you care for by relationship, husband, spouse, parent, as well as where you reside. And I will say that I reside in Baltimore, but Caregiver Action Network's offices are in Washington, D.C. All right. So now I'd like to transition to our second part of the agenda. But as you see there, we have a couple major things we're going to do today. That's all right. So we're going to have a panel discussion with some stories from really individuals that have or are currently caregivers of individuals with Alzheimer's or dementia and it having experience with neuropsychiatric symptoms. We're going to talk a little bit about the toolkits that we have available to you from Caregiver Action Network at caregiveraction.org, as well as just have some key takeaways and reflections of our time together. So we will finish up right on the dot around 2:30. So thanks everybody for participating today. We hope this to be a really great summit. So welcome everybody here. We are 160 individuals strong from all over the country, it seems. So really glad to have you with us today. So now we're going to actually take, sorry, thank you for the next slide there. So we keep using this terminology NPS, and sometimes you may hear that when speaking with your loved one's care team, with their doctors or other individuals that may support them. But NPS stands for neuropsychiatric symptoms. So, you know, it's most commonly associated with Alzheimer's disease and other conditions on cognitive decline, so cognitive impairment of some sort. And so that NPS is kind of just a shorthand way of us talking about the symptoms that are associated with that. But there are things that, unfortunately, many of you on today's Zoom may be familiar with. So agitation that may exhibit at night or day, verbal or physical aggression. So the individual, and each of these are usually outside of what their norm would be. Hallucinations or delusions can happen as well, where they may see things that aren't there. And for those that may have not seen that, the way that can look, it could be that they seem as if they are reaching for something. And so it may look as if it's a hand gesture, but maybe they believe they're seeing something there. It could be they're speaking or communicating or engaging with something that is not there, visibly for you, but they appear to be there for the individual. Mood swings can occur, and again, these are all along the lines of abnormal from their baseline, meaning that, these are things that they typically do not exhibit. Sleep disturbances and sometimes sundowning. So, I'm sure many of you are familiar, but there are some aspects of NPS that in the later evening hours that some of these symptoms tend to show up more readily. Anxiety or panic, depression, and even apathy. And so some or all or just a handful or one of these can show up, and it can ebb and flow. It can be one day or week that you see several of these, and then perhaps another day or week you don't see really many of these at all. this is not necessarily at all an indication of upon use. This is definitely not an indication upon you as a caregiver, though. So really keeping that in mind, that this really has more to do with the disease and how it's progressing. And unfortunately, because diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia are impairments cognitively that are progressive. This is really ebbs and flows, and so some days are going to be better and worse than others. But this is overall what we're talking about today when we mean NPS or neuropsychiatric symptoms. And now I'd like to introduce our panel today. So you'll see on the screen here, but actually, what we'll do is I'll introduce folks and we'll take off the PowerPoint, Dakota, if that's okay, and we'll allow our panelists to come on screen and we'll introduce everybody. All right, there we are. So I'll start with Kathy Hankins. Kathy Hankins hails from Maryland and is caring for her husband. And then Mary Perkins, who is in Delaware, and she supports her husband. Ajit Joshi, who is in New Mexico. So we have the West Coast represented here, is caring for his mom. And then Mary Beth Malamatos. Sorry, Mary Beth for butchering that. And who's in Florida and is caring for her mother, who's currently in hospice. Jason Presselman, who is in our neck of the woods here in Washington, D.C., the DMV area, is a long distance caregiver for his dad. Nicole Goebel, who many of you may know already, who is a member of the Caregiver Action team. But Nicole also was a caregiving youth for her grandmother, who had Alzheimer's. And then joining us as well, that may be chiming in during our conversation, is Jody Kane Pike, who lives in Maryland, but is also on the Caregiver Action team and was a caregiver to her mom. All right. So I just wanted to start off and open up, our panel conversation. And for everybody that's viewing today, we're going to have this conversation and we welcome you. If you have questions, we may not have time during this first part of the panel discussion to get to them, but we will endeavor to answer them as best we can as we move through our workshop today. So I just wanted to open up, the reason we're having this summit is really, there are so many unknowns when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia and neuropsychiatric symptoms. You go to the neurologist, you go to the primary care physician, whoever gives you that diagnosis, and then they describe it to you, but you really don't know. You don't really have a sense of it until you really start to see these symptoms or behaviors in your loved one. So, Kathy, I wanted to start with you and ask you, what are some of the more challenging behavioral or emotional symptoms that your husband has experienced? Or I know you also work in an adult day program, but that you've seen that you found to be more challenging.
Hi, everyone. Um, my husband, his initial reaction, and still partially now, his reaction is he just shut down, just nothing. He didn't talk much. If I ask a question, he will answer, but it's the appropriate answer. But he was in denial early on, and he still is in denial somewhat now. He's really he's not quite frank and honest to himself about his condition, even when things happen. But the most challenging part is he will never tell me if he's not feeling well. He won't tell me anything. Um, when he got COVID, and I know he didn't have a very serious case, but I noticed something. How are you feeling? I'm fine.
Mhm.
this is just an allergy, but let me give you a test. I don't think I need a test. Well, let's do it
Mm,
anyway. And even when I told him, well, you have COVID, well, I'm fine. And he did his best to maintain that. So he fractured his elbow. He fell and fractured his elbow. And I didn't realize it until he couldn't put his shirt on very well. Is something wrong? No, nothing's wrong.
mhm.
No pain.
Yeah.
So one of the big challenges for me is just understanding um, what's going on with him because he's so very silent at home. In daycare, he talks.
Mm, gotcha. So it's that communication piece of actually, hearing from him and understanding what's going on. And, sometimes it's seen as a defense mechanism that the person is either defensive or saying, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, or not sharing at all. But that has to be very difficult, Kathy, because it's even tougher to be a caregiver if you're not sure how to support the person that you're there to support. And sometimes it does take that communication. So same question to Jason, if it's all right. What have you seen as some of the more challenging behavioral or emotional symptoms that your loved one has experienced?
Sure, Marvell. Morning, good afternoon, folks. Yeah, so I was a long distance caregiver for my father who passed away 2 years ago. And one of the most challenging things was he would, while he was healthy, he was the gentlest, kindest, low key, calm person. And then, probably about 2/3 through the progression of his Alzheimer's, a lot of aggression, a lot of agitation. My mom and I, when I would visit, we would be just sitting on the sofa watching TV, and he would come up, get right in your face, start screaming profanities, obscenities right in your face. I mean, even escalating to things like, I'm going to kill you. And it's very, very difficult to, A, just see that change in your loved one, night and day from before the diagnosis. And B, just having the capacity to kind of take that and not escalate the situation and react to it. So just being able to kind of inject some mindfulness in that scenario, just be able to kind of breathe with it, let it pass. Um, it's really difficult. Um, so it definitely was a big learning curve for us, and over time we got much better at it. And 15 minutes later, he would storm off, go sit by himself in the living room. 15 minutes later or so, he would come back in, sit on the couch, start watching TV like nothing ever happened. So just kind of like learning to not react to that situation because it is going to blow over pretty quickly was, really important for us.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's unfortunately something that caregivers see, that you're kind of on edge at times because you don't know when it may occur. You don't know what may trigger it, or it may not have a trigger. It may be something internal to the person you're supporting, and then, as you said, it goes away. But really bringing a stress along with it. But as you mentioned, the mindfulness that kind of helps to center you. Um, Mary, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts as well about some of the more challenging behaviors or emotional symptoms that you've seen. Oh, you're on mute, Mary. Sorry.
That. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Just as a disclaimer, my situation is a little bit different today because my caregiver support was not quite the same. So those are the kind of issues that we all deal with, and they're part of everyday
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
Our situation in terms of the neuropsychiatric symptoms were a little bit different. It wasn't that he didn't have any, but he had surgery, and post-surgery woke up with hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia that continued intensely for months and didn't get diagnosed as what they are until many months later. And that period of time was not only frightening, the anxiety level that I was living with was almost impossible to live with. And it was all different kinds of things. It was thinking there were people outside going to break into the house. One night he told me I had to have a gun. I had to be prepared to use it. Just on and on with those kinds of scenarios. And the hard part about it is I was very knowledgeable and skilled in terms of dementia, but I didn't have the knowledge or the skill about dealing with the neuropsychiatric components, which now I know are way more common than many of us believe they are. And we also get told that psychiatric medications, psychotropics, are dangerous for people with dementia. And yet, if they truly have a psychosis at one point, they may need those medications in order to be able to operate in any kind of a regular life. And once we did get my husband on some medications, it did make a difference. We also had to do a 3-month respite stay in order to get him settled down. But all of that was due to the neuropsychiatric symptoms, not due to the regular components of dementia.
Mm-hmm. And that's really a complex set of series of circumstances you talk about, Mary. I mean, from having surgery to having a delirium and delusions coming out of the surgery, having those take hold for several months, and then having to have this medication management piece that's helping, but it's a process. It's not like it doesn't go away, doesn't change overnight, and it's never perfect. But there's this layered complexity that can happen that quite commonly when it comes to some of the behaviors. Ajit, I'd be curious to go to you next, and on the same question, some of the more challenging behaviors or emotional symptoms as a caregiver.
Sure. I'll pick up a little bit on what Jason had mentioned, as I too was a long distance caregiver for my father who has since passed away. And what I noted is that there's some symptoms that he had that my mother, for whom I am now the live-in caregiver, both share. So both my father and now my mother, I would say a lot of it was coming out of these physical issues. Mary referenced kind of the surgery. And so I think it's important to think about what are some of the triggering factors. So some of the triggering factors for my father were around physical pain. He had severe emphysema and COPD and just didn't have the ability to do what he could. And my mother, for whom I'm caregiving now, she has severe scoliosis and no balance. So she has this ongoing feeling of loss. She hasn't driven now for over 5 years, primarily prompted by me, actually, because of the pandemic. And at that time, there were no vaccinations available. So it was also concern for her. She's really doesn't have enough contact with other people beyond maybe one friend with whom she will trade WhatsApp messages, as a friend from over 50 years ago. So I think some of the triggering factors are important to think about. Second is really around kind of the symptoms that we may not necessarily label as depression and anxiety, and in some communities, using those terms can be problematic and challenging, and it's hard to actually name them and identify with them. Though I would say that there's this frustration in that the body doesn't cooperate as it used to. So there's physical decline, motor and sensory decline, communication decline, cognitive decline, and constantly seeking reassurance. And I think it's important what you mentioned earlier, Marvell, is what is the baseline and what's the delta? And I think I have to constantly reflect what are those behaviors that have always been there that I've seen and what's a little bit new. And I think that's important. I think what's been something that's new is this idea of forgetfulness. And then I end up being the person who's told, no, you're the one who's forgetful. You have bad memory. So it kind of gets flipped on its head if I kind of say, no, we talked about this or so forth. And I think the challenge is then caregiver burnouts. So, and then the last thing I'll just mention is apathy. So I think for apathy culturally, for my mother, from the South Asian context, she invokes a word for the divine, and then she's really asking for release from her physical body in which she's trapped. So I think those are some of the different behaviors and symptoms and kind of how it's affected me.
Yeah. No, gee, thank you for sharing that. And thanks for underscoring about kind of the baseline feel of it. Because there are aspects of this where the agitation of just being a bit confused or not being quite clear what's going on, that agitation can trigger something that is very normal for the person to be upset, and maybe that level of them being agitated is what you would typically see in them if they're upset about anything. But it either comes up at times that are unexpected or really much more difficult to get to the root of what may be causing the person to feel that way. So, there is that added complexity to it. And thanks for mentioning the burnout, because that is another aspect that we'll get a little bit into in a moment. Mary Beth, if you could, thanks for joining us, and just be curious to hear a little bit from you about, some of the more challenging behaviors or emotional symptoms that you've seen.
Well, I'm a nurse. I'll just say that right up front, and I'll tell you how embarrassed I am as a nurse, because I went into the situation thinking, I know how to deal with this. I have hundreds of patients with this condition. It is definitely one thing to see it, give some education, turn around and walk away and close the door until next week, and to live it day in and day out and 1 minute to the next. My mom blissfully has been in a happy place. Now, I will say, when I first realized something was not right with her, I had moved away, and my older daughter said, come down and check on Oma. She's not right. So I did. I came down, and she had dental work. After the sedation, she didn't really become herself again. And then I noticed extreme self-neglect. She was not bathing. She completely stopped taking her medication. She didn't clean her house. There was financial abuse, where some company convinced her she needed to buy all this extra blown-in insulation, and she was very embarrassed when I tried to bring it up, because she was still pretty cognitive, and she knew she made a big mistake, and she was very, very upset by it. Sexual abuse. She had a girlfriend that passed away, and the husband started dating my mother. He would come over with a bottle of wine, and they were intimate, and she thought she had a boyfriend. She was a war widow for 40 years. My dad's been missing in action. And so now she's got a man. And I was difficult to convince her, no, he's not after your heart. So we moved her in with us, and she did have hallucinations, which were very few, but then she started to have more and more. And basically she thinks she's got something in her hand, and she's always trying to give it to me. And as a nurse, I know that we're not supposed to restrain people, and medication is a form of restraint. But I had to restrain her. I had to, for her safety. She got up one night, wandered in the house, fell down the one step we had in the whole house, and broke her shoulder. That made her decline even more. So then but I didn't do any physical restraint on her person or anything that would hurt her. I took some belts. This is my husband's idea. Take a couple belts, tie them together, and go from one side rail to the other side rail of her bed. It's not on her. It's just from side rail to side rail. And she thought she couldn't get out of bed. It worked. And I also take a gait belt, and I put it around her and attach it to the back of the wheelchair. She's total care now. So, only so that she doesn't lean forward and try to pick something up off the floor and topple out. So she's on hospice. I'm a hospice nurse. They come in and they say, oh, you give great care. We don't have to worry about you. I said, whoa, I'm not her nurse. I'm her daughter. And I can sit and cry and tell you the things I'm going through, and you look at me like I should know better. I don't. I've never been in the shoes of the caregivers. And it's just, I have so much empathy for people, and I'm learning as I go. And so talking to other people who've already been through the stages, and their loved ones have passed, give me clues. I'm not alone. This isn't something new. I talk to my mom as though she was still the school teacher she was, and I get very angry when she doesn't catch on. And then I'm like, she can't. She's 10-second Tom. She cannot. And she does get agitated, like Bilbo Baggins. Arr! and it lasts for 2 or 3 seconds. And I know, just ignore it. You'll go do something else, come back, and she's all smiles and happy. So I'm not medicating her for any of these symptoms, because they're momentary or short-lived, and they don't require sedating her or medicating her. I don't want to do that unless I absolutely have to. So
yeah, Mary Beth, thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Because as someone that worked in retirement communities and nursing homes for 20 years, it is unfortunately very common. It's not as if an aide or a nurse is given 100% of the tools they will ever need to care for any type of condition. Like, that's just not feasible. But also to recognize that, and we would say this to everybody that's participating today, in the role of a caregiver, you have every right to say to a medical professional, someone that's supporting your loved one, I'm identifying as a caregiver right now. I may be a doctor during the day, a nurse during the day, or whatever shift I take. I may be a physical therapist, a nutritionist, whatever it may be. But your role is that is the caregiver, an advocate for your loved one, to be there for them, but also to recognize that everything you're seeing is not necessarily something you've seen in your career. It doesn't mean because you're a nurse that you have all this experience with this disease. It doesn't mean because you're a doctor that you have all this know-how, because quite frankly, until you are experiencing it, and everybody I'm sure on the screen knows that, and that's listening in, until you experience it as a caregiver, the uniqueness of the neuropsychiatric symptoms that you may see, you really got to take it as it comes. And what that also means is that you absolutely need support, and not just a pat on the back saying, hey, you're doing great, and we'll go on to the next person. So thank you so much for sharing that. One of the things I'd like to do is take a moment to add for a poll, just based on some of the conversation we've had, because when we're talking about these types of behaviors and how they appear, just would be curious to hear from our audience today. We're up to 182 so far. Our audience today, how confident are you in knowing what to do next? Because as you're hearing right now, you're kind of hearing caregivers that have gone through it. When you're experiencing this for the first time, or new behaviors or changing behaviors, it could be really catching you flat-footed as what do I do next? And would be curious to have you answer one of those questions there. So as folks continue to answer those, Nicole, I was going to go to you and just and ask you, what would you say is one of those things that someone could do next? As throughout the chat here, our behind the scenes folks, including Jody, are adding some resources from caregiveraction.org. But Nicole, any thoughts come to mind when it comes to when you see those behaviors crop up? What next?
I think that the biggest thing is, to kind of piggyback off of what so many of the panelists have said, is, understand that you don't understand. I think that that's something that is always really hard for any caregiver, is that when we're in that role, we take on so much ourselves, and we think that, we want to be able to answer all the questions. We need to be that source, and it's okay not to know all the answers. So when you are experiencing or seeing these symptoms and you're like, this is new, that's okay. I think the next step, obviously, one of the things we always talk about here at CAN is talking to your loved one's doctor, always keeping them in the loop to say, I've noticed this change. I've noticed that, to use some of the examples from the panelists, like I've noticed that mom, dad, whomever you're caring for, is giving me something in their hand, but there's nothing in their hand. Or I've noticed that, when we sit down to do something specific that may be part of the daily routine, they get really agitated. And they've never done that before. Being able to communicate with the doctor will help them, understand as well. A lot of times caregivers, because it can be an unexpected symptom, we think that maybe there's something else going on with our loved one too. When there are symptoms that look like something else, that can be more overwhelming because we want to make sure that our loved one is getting all the care that they need. And so being able to speak to, the doctor, get some of that input. But, also, folks are doing it by being here today. Engage with other caregivers, hear their experiences, because then you feel like, okay, I'm not the only one that's going
You're not
through
alone.
this.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Hey, Dakota, you want to tell us a little bit about the responses to our poll?
Sure. So what we're looking at here, it seems like around 8% of individuals have a go-to strategy that usually helps with NPS-related behaviors, with around 56%, so a bit more than half of people saying that they have a few things that they like to try, but it's trial and error. 24% are saying they feel overwhelmed and unsure, with 3% saying I avoid intervening unless absolutely necessary, and 8% saying they're currently not in the caregiving role.
Thanks, Dakota. It's not surprising that trial and error is kind of the largest one, and I see folks on the panel, some of your heads nodding, because that many times is a very expected and reasonable go-to. It may be frustrating, but the reality is that every strategy that we'll talk about today, every strategy on our website, anything you may see from other organizations like the Alzheimer's Association or other organizations that provide resources, it is a tool to help the individual. It may work, it may not work. It may work 15 times, and the 16th time, it's as if you never tried it before. And what we always try to tell caregivers is that give yourself the grace to know that it's not you. The interventions or the trial and error or the approaches you're trying. You're trying an approach that worked last time, but their brain is changing considerably as this disease progresses. And so an approach that may work one day or 1 month may not work the following time period. So I'm going to move to our next question. And I saw actually some comments in the chat about grief, and so grief and anxiety is what I want to talk about next. And Mary, I'm going to come to you first, if that's all right. And just, what have you seen as, a way to help manage anxiety related to caregiving? Because, for anyone that's a caregiver, if you aren't experiencing stress and anxiety, please let us know what medication it is that you're using, because we want to know, or whatever that approach is, to be able to manage it, because it is very, very difficult and a very common thing for caregivers to experience that can lead to burnout. And so managing anxiety is an important part of it. But Mary, any thoughts on that question of managing anxiety when it comes to being a caregiver?
Definitely. And I have to say, we are having a very heavy thunderstorm. So if you hear noise in my background, that's what it is.
Got it.
When my husband was going through the true psychosis for those 3 months before we moved him to a respite situation, the anxiety level at that point was something I had never experienced before. Every moment of every day was worrying about what was going to happen next, what was going to happen that night, what was he going to try to do, what was he going to threaten. And at that point, without a diagnosis, I didn't know what I was dealing with. And so my anxiety level was at a point that I had never experienced before. I didn't think I was anxious. I found out different. I was most definitely anxious. And when I look back, when you mentioned grief as a part of that, all that we went through in the 3 months of no diagnosis and the 3 months of respite to get everything under control. I really tell people that my husband died during that time. It's a lovely man who I've known for a very long time, who I care for now. But it really felt like I experienced his death. He never was going to be back to me in the way that he had been before. And I was fortunate sometime after that my primary care physician asked me if I would be willing to try some type of anti-anxiety medication. And I was like, well, what's it going to do to me? I've never taken anything like that. And he said, well, it just might make you go, a little sooner. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound so bad. And that actually sounds good. And I do have to say, I wish more primary care physicians had those conversations with caregivers, because that changed our world. My anxiety level went down. Consequently, his reactions got better because I wasn't projecting the fear and the anxiety that I had been. And I was able to be more compassionate and more patient. And I was able to have a smile on my face more often. And that made all the difference in him.
Yeah, that very well put, Mary, and just understanding that connection, and of just that your feelings and emotions, as one might expect, even before your loved one, had Alzheimer's or dementia, that we're humans. Our moods impact one another. It's empathy, it's sympathy, it's really impactful. Ajit, I'd be curious to hear your perspective on managing anxiety as a caregiver for your loved one, in the sense of how when you see them exhibiting symptoms that are in the anxiety or just agitation phase, what ways have you seen that perhaps work for you to manage that behavior?
Sure. Thanks, Marvell. I loved what Mary you had to say about, if we have the smile, then our loved one picks up on that smile. And I start with that because I think this question for me really reminds me of the proverbial oxygen mask that those of us that have been on an airplane, we know that the flight attendant will tell us about putting on the oxygen mask. And I think this metaphor is really apt and critical when we think about anxiety management and caregiver management. So I can relate to 24% of the people that answered the poll saying that this is overwhelming. And acknowledging that it's overwhelming is one important thing. One strategy that's worked for me in terms of anxiety management is an acronym that is called MEDS, MEDS. And so M stands for meditation, and it could be relaxation, mindfulness, yoga nidra, breathing practices to meditate. E stands for exercise, so that could be cardiovascular, strength training, flexibility, balance. D stands for diet, so nutrition, and S for sleep. So when I'm kind of off, and I even developed a color-coded spreadsheet to see how am I doing, and it was my own tracking tool. I like journaling, so I'll do handwritten journaling. I've done this color-coded spreadsheet using these 4 MEDS categories. So I have done that. I appreciate as well that there are also pharmacological tools that are available to us, and we can avail ourselves of that. Talk therapy is available. Equine therapy also has been helpful. So I think all these different kinds of strategies are important to think about when it comes to anxiety management, and knowing that when we get more anxious or more stressed out, the whole home environment is going to reflect a sense of what I will call dis-ease or disharmony. And then as soon as that equilibrium is lost, we've lost our ability to care for that loved one and their ability to actually receive the support that we are intending to give.
Yeah, very, very, very well put. And seeing just some of the comments in the chat. Thank you for the acronym, Ajita. I had not heard that one before. I really like it. I'll hold on to that. Also just recognizing that when you're working through some of these in the moment kind of emotions, it can be very difficult to even remember what you told yourself prior what you would do. And so just give yourself also some grace, knowing that it's never going to be perfect. That's not really the goal. Otherwise we would always be falling short. It really is, how can you in that moment, in the present moment, get a better outcome for yourself and a better outcome for your loved one. Um, Kathy, I wanted to come back to you and ask the same question. Any advice or thoughts you would give to the caregivers that are on our webinar today regarding managing anxiety of either your own or of the loved one that you're supporting?
Sure, and thank you. I'm with Ajit on the meds thing. He and I kind of share yoga and all of those wonderful things. I'm a fitness and all of that kind of stuff, and alternative practitioner. But I have to add a but to it, because I'm also a one who deals with abandonment issues from childhood, from
Mhm.
childhood trauma. And so sometimes, no matter how much I practice my practice, my brain will take over and I fall apart. I don't, I usually fall apart in the garage, but I fall apart. I don't berate myself for experiencing what I experience. I mean, I experience anxiety, anger sometimes. I, in the tradition of meds, I allow myself to feel what I feel. I don't berate myself. I know it's okay. I'll get over it. I don't take it out on my loved one, uh, but it's okay that I feel the way I feel and experience what I experience. Sometimes that acceptance of what I'm experiencing, helps go beyond it. I also take touchy feely vacations. I go to Omega Institute up in Rhinebeck, New York, and I do something nice. I've even gone out to Esalen Institute out on Route 1 in California, and I have kind of plopped down in a nice mineral bathtub overlooking the coast, mineral water, and just going, aha, I get away and do wonderful things, holistic type things for myself. And again, I never allow myself to feel bad about what I experience because I am human too. And what we are experiencing, uh, day in, day out, day in, day out. And I meditate forever. In fact, I can go into a meditation right now. I'm joking, and I joke too much. It is in
No,
my
you
nature.
don't joke too much. You don't
It is
joke
in
too
my
much, Kathy.
nature to make light of things, which makes it easier here at home because I will pass by my husband and I will just walking by. I might feel miserable, but just passing by, I'll quip out with something like, "Oh my God, did you see that bird outside? What the hell was that?" And I'll make a joke about it. It's in my nature to do that, though. When feeling my worst, I will say, "Oh my God, is there something wrong with your nose? It looks kind of crooked," those kinds of things. Um, and even in my husband's frustration, when I do things like that, it's distracting, and it works
Hmm.
pretty good in distracting. But for me, I am very, and I think one of the things we talk about in group is you never really do anything wrong.
Yeah.
You don't do anything wrong. it's pretty difficult to do the wrong thing. We're all doing the best we can and experimenting and learning from each other, and that's great too. Sometimes I'll have a couple of ladies from group when I'm coming from daycare, and daycare we all meet each other and just sitting around, and they'll grab me and say something silly or do something silly, and that helps too. That kind of support. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what I do. Play around
Yeah.
too much, but
Well,
also
it makes a
love
difference. I'm
myself.
sorry. Go ahead, Kathy.
No, no,
No,
no.
yeah, it makes a huge difference, with, again, pulling back on my prior experience. And here's one of the things as well, whether you want to consider it a benefit or a silver lining, sometimes you can find the approaches you utilize, the verbiage you use, reusing it, and I'll give you an example that it may seem crass, but one of the things I would do when working with residents in communities that I've served that are living with Alzheimer's or dementia, and it'd be kind of this thing of where are you going, you know, and I'd found this response that for me, please don't go out and do this unless you just feel you want to try it. I would just very dramatically go, I gotta go poop, and they would look at you and usually laugh. But either way, they were satisfied with the response because they understood you got to go, and I offer that to you because sometimes you may find that you're looking to provide an answer that helps them, which may not be the answer to their question. The answer to their question may be something that they really don't want to hear or need to hear, but what you're trying to address is perhaps what they are feeling. And so thank you so much, Kathy. I was reminded of a scene, if you haven't seen it, playing on PBS right now, and I think you can stream it as well, is the documentary Caregiving, which Caregiver Action Network was a presenting sponsor for, or presenting partner for. And there's one individual who was caring or been caring for his wife, and you see him, he would post on TikTok videos, and sometimes he would just be in the car screaming, tears coming down his rolling eyes, and just flat out screaming. And that was one of his ways. He just kind of got it out, and I'll say this for those that I have a very difficult time with meditation and mindfulness. I try to work on it, but I have to tell you, sometimes screaming into a pillow can be very, very helpful as well.